Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Credential Chats. We are joined this week by Alex Fronduto. Alex is the faculty lead with Masters of Education in Higher Education Administration within the Graduate School of Education at Northeastern University. Alex, let me catch my breath from that one and just welcome you to AACRAO's Credential Chats. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
And in fairness, I did make Alex give me the entire job title. Alex, just to kick us off, would you mind just sharing sort of just where your interest in this space comes from?
Sure. So before the long title you just said, I worked in enrollment management for about 12 years at a private higher education institution in Boston, and now working at Northeastern Credentials, lifelong learning, all of those aspects are near and dear to our heart, especially my school is within the College of Professional Studies. And so we're working typically with adult learners or students that are taking potentially gap years, going into bachelor's completion programs. And so the credentialing space is something at Northeastern we think a lot about. And then myself as a researcher within higher education and enrollment management.
And maybe that's kind of the first place to go is that enrollment management lens, right? Of just, a lot of people are talking about micro-credentials and, a lot of the conversations, I think, unfortunately, kind of start and end with create credentials, issue credentials, make money. And, Northeastern has been on the bleeding edge, I think, of some of the really great research in this space. But, specific to enrollment management, what are some of the kind of things you're seeing and thinking about and dreaming big about as far as that bringing that enrollment management thought process and lens to micro credentials?
That's a great question. And I definitely see the same thing that it really is just looking as a one-time shop kind of revenue generation. And kind of that's your one thing. You get this credential, badge, whatever, move on. But I really like to see it through the scope of the entire kind of funnel, so to speak, in terms of enrollment management. So thinking of it even for current students, there are a variety of ways you can be offering different types of credentials, whether included in tuition as just a marketing branding technique, right, to enroll more students or adds additional cost to add potential skills, knowledge to students. So that's even additional revenue that isn't one time. And then for my other piece is really alumni, thinking about the lifelong learning, thinking about how you can re-engage them, whether that becomes them enrolling into a different program, a certificate after doing maybe a badge, or just a way to continue to engage alumni, which we also know can lead to volunteerism, potential donations. So there's that whole other scope of revenue that people may not be considering that just a simple building of a credential could help you with.
And you say simple, but for anybody who doesn't know, like a lot of times, especially once we've created the credential, aside from the programmatic side, on the learning record side, we're issuing, verifiable credentials, and a lot of us in the case of, are doing it as an open badge, that there's all this metadata that we can put in.
Mhm.
And so, are you with this sort of enrollment management lens thinking about that metadata that as you talk about, alumni, about engagement, about, continuing to meet them where they are, like that we can actually take some of that metadata as a way of kind of gaining insights and connecting with people?
Of course, if they're looking to keep re-engaging, knowing what types of courses or programs or just even learning opportunities, events, depending on if you have different levels of badges, there is so much data, even dependent on what type of credential you're talking about, could allow you to then, even AI could help you think about bucketing individuals and essentially offering up, let's say, even on your website, for example, different things that they might be interested in. It's almost as a shopping cart marketing aspect to say if someone took, something on leadership, well, maybe they would be interested in all of these other types of leading teams, management offerings, and the metadata and what they enroll in is going to help you do that. And I think also understanding that there's a whole nother piece, especially with those types of courses and metadata, of thinking about employers as well is kind of where my other, thought process always goes when I think about these two aspects.
And say more about that, like on that employer side.
So I think most people are thinking that credentials are going to, help additional revenue either by like a stealth student just coming to take something, or again, current students, your alumni. But those are all within that bucket of people that are already engaging with you. Well, could you be offering something of value to people elsewhere? So something that, we're very intrigued in Northeastern, and many other institutions are doing this as well that I've interviewed in terms of enrollment management, is thinking about where are those corporate partnerships that you can be doing. So essentially thinking about what is that business relationship you could have with a big company that might not have all of the learning and development that they need at their place, right? Some big, huge companies may already have, an L&D, learning and development department, but some don't. So where could you be offering that value to offer stackable credentials? Maybe you can upskill their employees. So maybe even the sciences, something we do a lot is maybe they're all at a certain level, but you want to upskill them to the next level. What happens if, we could be the person that provides that for all of the people in their company, right? That's giving another avenue. It's giving value, and it's allowing to have your brand. So if anyone else maybe then wants like a program or something else, you're going to be front of mind.
And that's sort of the next piece that you sort of hinted at. And I know I didn't forewarn you about this, so sorry in advance if this is catchy, but I have a perception the Northeastern has long been already thinking about this of that what next, that okay, we've engaged with this partnership and we are really thoughtful about that metadata and those learning outcomes and maybe having some sort of crosswalks to what might come next for learners that, hey, we started with you through this partnership and here's some places where you can carry this forward into certificates or master's degrees with us.
Right. And I would even add doctorate, right? We are thinking into the future that if you have someone early on in their career, they get, they have their master's with you, then they come back, do some upskilling certificate. Well, then could they come into a doctoral program later when they really want to take that kind of last leadership space, again, whichever kind of area they're looking into? But it doesn't all have to be in the now. Many, many institutions, even when it comes to many other enrollment management topics, are very much now and like, when can we get someone in the door today? And that's what hurts most institutions, because if you're not thinking years out, you're going to, again, maybe enroll a student today, but then 2 years from now, you're going to be plummeting in applications, again, depending on what type of student population you're looking at. So for us, it's keeping that pipeline available and open and almost free flowing. I think a goal of our institutions and others is to let people have on and off ramps. It's something that our dean, for example, talks about all the time. Can a student come in, do whatever they need, come back out, and then come back when they need it, instead of kind of enrolling, let's say, for a bachelor's 4 years or a master's a full 2 years? Could you stack a bunch of things over X amount of times that would then grant you whatever that degree maybe you need to have? Or maybe you don't need a degree in the future for that.
Yeah, I think that just makes so much sense, especially as things evolve, right? And a student who was with us 5 years ago or 10 years ago did not have the opportunity to get credentialed in something, skills related to AI, for example, right? And so, yeah, we need to keep engaging them. And, something else that you said just makes me wonder where your thinking is, is with recognition for prior learning and PLA or these sorts of on-ramps, it seems like there's a lot of mindsets of, viewing it as like, why would we give a 15% off coupon, for this, graduate program? And then there's others who are like, well, maybe it's actually 85% net new tuition from people who weren't going to be here otherwise. Where does your mind go with the opportunities along those fronts?
I am 100% the latter in all cases. I tell everyone that. People like to think of a discount. And again, obviously, especially in the undergrad space, which I'll focus more on the grad space, but just want to acknowledge the fact that I understand discounting at an undergrad, especially private institution, is what is detrimental to many institutions right now that are facing closures and mergers. I feel like I just have to own that first. But the second half, really thinking about, the graduate learner, the adult learner, those on and off ramps, and that includes not just credentials for us, especially, as I said, I work in the Graduate School of Education. So, for example, we have a lot of K-12 teachers that do a lot of professional development. It's required for their job. Well, why can't we be giving them credit for those types of PD? And secondly, why can't Northeastern be offering them? And so that's another piece like tied into just PLAs of offering that as an opportunity to them to allow them to enroll and come into that. For us, we have like a master's of teaching, we have a doctorate. So thinking about those types of spaces for us is really important just using K-12 as an example, that already has PD associated with it. But also, again, with credentialing and things, could we be offering their PD to their district as another way for us to brand ourselves and have other ways to offer badges and things like that? So it's your question actually makes me think two different things at the same time.
I love that. And as a former K-12 Spanish teacher, and that's something that I definitely, would have valued is, hey, if I got this, Adobe Creative Educator credential that showed certain skills with, creative products, not only could I maybe through a partnership with a university get, graduate credit, which was how we got raises in my school
Right.
district, but also does that give me a head start to a master's degree that I might not otherwise see myself wanting to be a part of, right? Just makes that on-ramp a little less steep and maybe even downhill for me. I guess speaking of which, I know you mentioned directly offering stuff with industry and partners, but do you have ideas specific to that PLA around credentials that maybe are offered already that people may be bringing in from outside with industry partners? Um, that may not be accredited institutions, but do have learning outcomes that we could verify and validate and trust and show value for.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speak specifically, but I know a few examples for us have happened in a lot of the science spaces, whether it's biotechnology, other research science positions that, again, may have specific training that they got at their company, right? They can run certain experiments, they can, do certain types of formulas of a wide variety of pieces. Well, again, that didn't come from their previous degree. And it's something that they're going to need to know in the future. So, same thing, can you bucket that into a prior learning and give them credit for something that they shouldn't need to take, right? That's the whole point of kind of lowering the amount of barriers and increasing access, right? That's what we want to be doing, is allowing as many students as possible into the higher education realm ecosystem. Again, maybe not for a degree, but again, to allow them to have what they might perceive as a better job, a better salary. We know the outcomes for those types of things are just going to be benefits to the individual student and then obviously the economy and the world. And so I always take the standpoint of just reducing barriers, increasing access, whatever that may be. And so I hope that not only our institution, but other institutions are looking at what are these different types of offerings, whether it's PLA, it's, credentialing, stackable credentials into, a certificate, bachelor's, master's. So that's kind of where I hope we continue to do those types of things.
And it's all but, and if we were in person, I'd be one to fist bump you right now. Actually, you just got me so excited here. And I think especially, we're recording this, I don't know when people are going to watch this, but we're recording this just before the annual Convergence Conference for 2025. And I think, Alex, you're just touching on all these things. It's why a conference like that exists of, these units around campus that if we want to and are willing to, can really be working in coordination to, help our learners, both with the access and then on the back end with opportunity on what to do with their credentials. One just sort of parting question, you're clearly passionate about it, you're clearly excited about this stuff. As you think about the future, what's something that you're excited about, whether it's, a year out or 5 years out at Northeastern or more broadly, what's, kind of just do you dream big about?
It's a tough one. I think we could be here all day, but I would say kind of high level, I think there's going to be a lot of changes in higher education, I think for a lot of reasons, but I do think that this piece is going to be a big one. If it continues to gain momentum, there's arguments, to and for a lot of these different areas, but as it gains more momentum, that idea of dismantling what people perceive higher education in general to be, right? It's perceived to be this like structured, 4-year bachelor's, 2-year master's, 3, 4-year doctorate. Like, what happens if all of that went away? What would we be doing? How would that work? And again, I don't have answers to all of that, but I think it would actually allow for a lot more collaboration, especially like you said with the Convergence Conference, right? It would require everyone to be working as one. And again, as we all hope, it's with the student's best interest in mind. And so that's kind of where I hope we see ourselves in the future as we think about like what is actually a necessity for a student to be the best that they can be, and what does that look like?
Wow, Alex, I think you just gave us the title of this week's chat. Just helping students be the best that they can be. Is Alex Fronduto with Northeastern University, the Master of Education, Higher Education Administration within the Graduate School of Education at Northeastern University. Alex, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you, everybody, for sharing your time and engagement with us, and we hope to see you next week on AACRAO's Credential Chats. So long.